Okay, so this video is going to follow up the video that we watched on action potentials and how the action potential is going to move through the neuron. So you guys know that the sodium's going to go rushing in, the potassium's going to go rushing out, then the sodium-potassium exchange pump is going to return everything to its rightful place, okay? And then once that happens, the action potential has passed through. So I'm going to start by talking about the action potential coming this way. That is a very big blue arrow. All right. So we're talking about the fact that we cannot see the presynaptic cell body. So this is the presynaptic neuron in this section of the drawing. And then the postsynaptic neuron is this one here. This one here is the postsynaptic neuron. Okay, so the presynaptic neuron is the one that we don't see the cell body of. The action potential is going to travel through the presynaptic neuron. And when it arrives at this little space here, it's going to have a gap, and that gap is called the synapse, okay? And that synapse is going to have a gap, all right? So remember, this is the axon terminal that was from the presynaptic neuron, all right? And this here is the receiving postsynaptic neuron, all right? And what we're going to see is that as the action potential comes down and stimulates the axon terminal, these little synaptic vesicles, which are filled with something we call neurotransmitters. I'm going to make that a little smaller here so we can see it all at the same time, okay? So inside the synaptic vesicles, we have neurotransmitters. And neurotransmitters are very interesting. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about them, but neurotransmitters are what are affected when you take drugs, all right, or when your body produces drugs. So when I say drugs, I know that sounds strange, but one of the things that you have that your body will release, I'm sorry, I'm looking for it right now in my page and I can't seem to find it. Okay, endorphins. So that's what I was going to talk about. Maybe you guys have heard about endorphins. Endorphins block the transmission and perception of pain. So there are certain processes in the human body that if you get severely injured, your body will release endorphins so that way your brain does not receive that pain. And that's a type of a neurotransmitter. There's another one called acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is the main one that we're going to see in the synapses here that facilitates transmission of nerve impulses across those synapses. I didn't say that right. Synapses. Okay, there's one that's called epinephrine. It arouses the brain and maintains alertness. Serotonin is the one that's going to help you with sleep, temperature control, sensory perception, all right? Dopamine is responsible for motor control. And believe it or not, when you drink alcohol, it inhibits your ability to control yourself because of where it affects, where the effect takes place in the brain and then what that part of the brain controls, okay? So I'm not going to focus too much on those. They are really interesting if you want to look them up and see which neurotransmitters do what. But neurotransmitters are the chemicals in your brain that are released to send the message from the presynaptic neuron to the postsynaptic neuron, okay? And the steps that go along with that are pretty simple. The action potential is going to arrive at the axon terminal. When it does, a significant amount of calcium is released. I don't know if you noticed, but we hadn't talked about calcium yet. Okay, so those calcium ions are going to enter the end of the axon and cause those neurotransmitters in those vesicles to be released. All right, once the neurotransmitters diffuse across the synapse, they're going to bind to the receptors. Do you see these little gray? These are receptors. And these little green dots are going to click into those receptors. And when they do, they're going to open those channeled gates. These are gated channels. And when the green dots attach to those channels, they then open. And when they open, the action potential then can enter the next neuron. When they open, the sodium goes rushing in. The potassium goes rushing out. The cell goes from being polarized to depolarized. It then repolarizes, okay? And those neurotransmitters are then quickly broken down, or they're transported back into little vesicles that go back into the presynaptic neuron. Okay, so this is a pretty difficult concept. It is something that once you understand it, it's pretty simple. But in order to understand it, it is a little bit confusing. Okay, but again, you are going to have the transmission of the impulse from one neuron, the presynaptic neuron, crossing the synapse, going to the postsynaptic neuron, or the message could be being transmitted into an organ, or the message might be transmitted into a muscle, causing you to contract a muscle so that way you can move or digest your food or your heart will pump. Okay, so again, a synapse is the space in between two neurons. The action potential is going to jump from one neuron to the other by crossing the synapse. If your body does not have the correct neurotransmitters, the message will not be sent. Okay, so we need to make sure that we have the proper amount of neurotransmitters in our brain and that we have the right amount, the right kinds of neurotransmitters in our brain in order to open those gated channels on the other side, carrying the message to either another neuron, some sort of organ or muscle, or a gland. Okay? All right, so that's the synapse. Hope you have a great day.